Welcome back to Your Chapters, Your Story, the podcast where we dive into untold stories and the experiences that shape us. Today I'm joined by one of my dearest friends, Natasha, a wife, a mom, health and wellness coach, fitness instructor, and an entrepreneur. But beyond that, she has an incredible story of faith and transformation. Her journey is one of redemption, strength, and unwavering belief. Let's dive in.
We've had many conversations of life and what we've gone through.
Yeah.
And our marriages was how we connected. With all of the things you've gone through, you feel like is one thing that you could give wisdom to people as far as your life journey?
Oh, gosh, broad. The thing that I've seen over and over for me personally is God's faithfulness, that truth of this greater purpose, like his bigger will. And we can hold to that like future hope and assurance that no matter what we're going through, we are going to like see like the other side. And I think that I'm not sure if it's like our culture now that we're all looking for like instant gratification, like find your happiness. And I think that that's like very daunting to people because like life is not always happy. So it's like, what are the deep things that our soul needs? And how do we walk through life looking for like the meaningful moments and the joyful things? And how do we kind of like peel back layers of ourself?
Did you grow up with faith?
I did, but I feel like it has always been my own.
Do you think it was just more going to church?
At the beginning, for sure. Yeah. And I actually grew to love, I grew up in Canada, but our neighbors when I was about 5 or 6, I guess, I loved being at their home. So I loved going over to their house, and they went to like a church that I just remembered I truly enjoyed. And us moving to Texas, which was a big shift from the north, but I feel like God used those moments from a faith journey. Growing up, it was always important to me, but it was really my own.
I grew up, my mom was Lutheran, worked at the church, and then the kids would go to Sunday school. I didn't really grow up with faith at all and understanding God. But then in my 20s, somebody bought me a book. I still have it. It was kind of my first exposure, I would say, to God, but it was called Lord, Teach Me How to Love. It made me realize kind of who God was and what he wanted from us, which to me was love. I think a lot of people grow up going to church, but then they didn't necessarily walk it out, right?
That's the thing, knowing your story, that your mom was Lutheran, how when you're a young child and you put together that she is a Christian and yet all these things have been allowed to happen to you. You know, with my dad, who I think faith has been a struggle with him, he was forced to show to church every week, and then his dad was abusive, and he was the one making sure they all looked good. I think so many things that we might say can happen to us, I've started to try and say they're happening for us. My challenge to myself recently has been like, if this was allowed to happen, then I know God is going to use it. So like, let me be okay with your will. Let me have peace in this moment that I hate.
I can say going through what I was going through with my divorce being so painful, I was angry at God.
Yeah.
It's hard when you are going through something that you think, well, God, if I'm doing all these great things, why did that happen?
It's really hard. And so kind of going back to that mentality that I think is very human of, well, if I am earning my way, right? Because this is what we're taught from the ground up, right? Do good in school, do good in your job, go to the next level, do all things perfect, get here. And then we kind of start realizing as life happens that actually isn't the case. These breaks that come that don't follow our like human equation of like, do good, work hard. My hope for people is that kind of like you in those darkest moments, we can say whatever, God, but we've probably been doing that for a long time. Mm-hmm. Or, okay, you have my attention. Like, I haven't even been looking to you. Or I've been using you as like a genie in a bottle of like, okay, I need you now. Come say some happy things and then make my life happy again so I can forget you. And God doesn't want that. He wants to sit intimately with you for you to know him and understand who you are in him. Every little thing that I've gone through, I've realized more and more how much the Lord is after my heart and not my like happiness or these big things that we're trying to achieve here. I look back on the hardest parts of like my life. I just see the Lord again in his like humor being like, but I was there. And I gave you this person and I gave you this moment. I think it's like Augustine that talked about God like a stained glass window, you know, like faith. And we like are kind of with our faces pressed towards this little piece. And it's like all these weird colors. They don't look good together. And then if we step back, it's just this beautiful piece of art. And we're like, oh my gosh, you see how all these broken pieces came together to create this? Or how sweet if we can just like keep a little mental track of how every little thing, if we choose to see it like that, I mean, we can hold on to negativity our entire life and only focus on that. But you know, how God brings in all these people. And in meeting you, even in the timing, we had never met. And like we connected over, my friend was going to throw that gala for
Michelle.
Yeah, for people who had gone through sexual abuse, which you to a much bigger extent, but that was in my past as well. So both really passionate. And then we bump into each other the next day at our kids' preschool. And then such a similar story. And I felt like I was a little bit ahead of you in terms of the story of how our marriages fell apart, but you helped me heal. Even though I think we all mentally know that we're like not the only ones that have gone through something, when it feels like you're so alone in so much pain, it is such a beautiful thing to be able to be transparent with someone and to realize that you're not alone in that story. And maybe even if it's not the same thing, that these human emotions that we feel on confusion, loss, rejection, not being worthy enough. I just think that God is so sweet and kind, placing two broken people together to show that like so much life and laughter. I mean, that season, like the worst season, is still like kind of my favorite season because it brought out so much like freedom in ways in me and brought so many beautiful people, you being one of them, into my life. And so it's like, please don't let me go through that ever again. But thank you. Even it is really hard some days to feel that. But man, reach out to anyone. Don't feel like you have to be alone. Like talking, writing, like anything, your body has to release this stuff. And I just think God is good.
It was so nice because you were ahead of me in your story. I think we do feel alone, especially if somebody's not walking that same walk. It is hard to comprehend because I'm not in that same type of pain. It's such a comfort to have and find relationships that do have similar stories because they can be relatable. You know, losing your identity with that, the divorce. Who am I? You know, am I a mom? I had quit my job. I know you went through owning a company too. I was just so lost. I didn't know whether I should go forward, back, left.
I think even for like women listening to this, like that feeling just becoming a mom. When you've been a career woman, when you've been able to kind of make your way, right? And been able to control your destiny and you've been succeeding on your own, like that's what you know. And so whenever just thing feels like it's all of a sudden combusted and you're like, I don't know what to do with this anymore. Like your voice has been taken from you. And that was a struggle with me too. Like I felt that God was like always talking to me in that time because I would vocally have said to anyone before my divorce happened, I know my identity in Christ. And then like your job goes, your husband goes, all this stuff goes and you can kind of say it, but you don't feel it. You're like, man, I'm nothing. I didn't realize I put so much value in my career to like form my identity, or I didn't realize I put so much value in like, I'm a happily married mom, or I'm this. And then it just feels like, okay, if I have nothing, I had two things that I was saying. Who am I really at the core? And like, are you enough, God? Because I would have said, yeah, God's enough. But then when it all goes, you're like, oh, like, let this be good with my soul. But what God showed me there, being with me in those moments, is that He is enough. These dark times, they can make us go back and almost find healing for things that we've been living with for a long time. And I think for me, I didn't realize how much I had repressed feeling not worthy. And that kind of goes back to not really being protected in sexual abuse and then finally saying something about it and no one's standing up for it. Or I moved a lot, just lack of relationship with people and just really walling off and being fine on my own, but feeling a little bit unworthy around people. And when the divorce happened, man, all those emotions came back up. And so that was where I think the Lord was like, you're going to get through this and I'm going to help you with this. And with me, with people around you, like I'm going to go back and I'm going to heal this wound. You've been carrying it too long.
Yeah.
And in the grand scheme of things, I know it sounds crazy, but like I needed to be healed of that. And I don't know had I stayed in my marriage or maybe it would have happened a different way. Like if that would have ever left.
I feel that exact way.
Yeah.
Like I needed to get that broken. I just wanted to be loved. It wasn't just my marriage. It was the little girl saying, don't leave me.
I think every single person here, to some extent, on this planet, in this world, like we're walking around with these emotional wounds from our childhood that we mask.
Do you feel like in that moment when you were going through your stuff that you would have thought it had anything to do with childhood? I didn't connect the dot of like the pain I was going through wasn't just the pain of that divorce.
No, so many layers. Mine came in a moment. I was doing like a recovery group, I guess, through the church that I started. So maybe like yours, when I found out that my husband had been having an affair, I also thought, I mean, I don't know, I'm just super naive. Like, okay, well, we're staying together. We've been together for so long. In my opinion, like nothing was really wrong. Like kind of how you felt. Like maybe we were a little disconnected. We had a young, our son was like 3 at the time. So, and I went down that path of like, what could I have done? Bringing up stuff from the past of like, I'm not enough. I'm not worthy. But all that to say, I was doing this recovery group that I thought was just going to like help me get through like this rough patch. Like I never thought we were going to get a divorce. And so we were going through like a workbook, and it wasn't what I expected. It was just like going back into the basics of who God was and his heart for us. And it was in that moment that I had just this overwhelming, I don't even know how to explain it, like chills, out of body experience as I was reading. And I genuinely felt the Lord say, like I could see us in a field, like Jesus with his arms around me when I was 6, which is when I was sexually abused. And he's like, I love you and I'm here. And that opened me up to realize that even in my marriage, and I think in all my relationships, like I never felt enough. I just didn't. And I didn't realize how, I mean, there were so many other things, but I was such a performance-driven person, grades, being a good person, all these things. How do I earn my way, my value? And it was like this weight got lifted. I just remember crying and feeling like, almost like I don't believe that. And that's like my message to anyone listening is like, if you can just take a moment and know that like you are enough in and of yourself.
I think going through my divorce and now kind of really just sitting on my own, kind of quiet in silence and reflection, finally realizing I don't need to be anybody but who I am.
Yeah.
Like true, authentic Teresa is good enough.
It's interesting being in another committed relationship, the fear that can creep back up in terms of, okay, what if this person leaves me? Those are all things I feel like I have to just like daily. And in terms of like building a faith, I mean, that is, I think, the biggest battle. It's Corrie ten Boom who wrote The Hiding Place. And she like, that will forever be maybe one of my favorite books. So to everyone listening, if you're a reader, read that book. But beautiful story of faith. She is one that says like, hold all things loosely. With my husband now, who I love and trust, but like, I can't guarantee what will happen. I don't have any control over him. As much as we can maybe feel like we can't manipulate people. Like that's not allowing someone to be authentic and just allowing the freest, most pure expression of love. And then I think as a mom, like, oh my gosh, I want to like hold my kids so tight. We were just talking about it in there. Like, can you even send your kids to the mall anymore? I mean, there's so much fear. So man, life is just such a balance of like truly just trying to love people, help them grow into themselves with no expectation for what it is going to do for you. And that's a beautiful spot to be, right? Like that in and of itself, just loving generously, because for me, like I've experienced that grace and love, but then trying to keep laying down what our fallbacks are. And for mine, it's a lot of wanting to control, to know I'm safe, but like, what is that going to do?
Do you go back to your childhood experience when you were 6 and being sexually abused?
Yeah.
Do you ever think about like that in the moments today of like keeping you grounded to know that it goes back to that little girl?
Yeah, I feel more than anything else, it was more things that I like suppressed afterwards. So it was speaking up on it and then feeling like nobody went and said anything to the person that like harmed me.
Did you tell somebody? Because mine was, I obviously told my mom.
Right. I told my parents, actually, to be honest, it happened with, ironically, like I have to laugh again because things are, layered in life. But the sweet family who I felt helped me find my faith, it was with someone in that family. And we ended up moving. It happened over a summer. I didn't say anything because I was so young. That was confusing. I didn't know what to say at that time. And then it was like out of sight, out of mind. And I do feel like you get this protection as a child if you're not in it all the time, of almost like you forget. But then this person was going to come and visit us. And I remember having like a panic attack and finally like saying as best I could to my mom that like I had been touched, I wasn't comfortable, but also like that felt very strange to talk about. They still came and visited and I felt whatever. And then just over the course, because they had been such good family friends, no matter what I said, we would still have to be around the family or like go see him. And I remember at a certain point, finally, it was when I was in college, and he was older than me, but he was getting married to a woman who had a daughter who was about 6. And I just kind of lost it. And I also lost it at my parents of like, I don't want to go to this person's wedding. Like, how have you not heard me time after time again say, I was violated by this person. I don't want to see him. You know, I'm finally getting a voice. Maybe it was so far they didn't think it was a big deal, or I'd always just been fine with it. But I went to his wedding and I remember feeling sick, and I wrote a ton of poetry at that time of like, how can you look at me? How can we just come up and you try and give me a hug like you've never done anything to me? Like, just what disassociation do people go through? So more than anything, I think I had an anger towards my parents of not being protected, or like, what does it matter if you say anything? Nobody listens. God, my parents are listening. Like, they're amazing. We've worked through this as a family because I had to like really process it with things that happen in life. But there definitely for me was just this season of I became my own person. I went off and did my own thing. I didn't feel like I wanted to express a lot to my parents because, you know, other than normal everything's, but like emotional depth things, I dealt with that differently. And
well, that's where suppression starts.
Well, and looking into, you know, my first marriage, I don't know, like, I think I did share deep things, but I think also, you know, you learn when you've learned to handle things inwardly because it doesn't feel safe to share, or it feels like you won't be heard or you'll be dismissed. That's not great for the relationship that is supposed to be. Like, you're supposed to be one person, you know, that intimacy. And if the person that you're with doesn't want to go deep either, I mean, I do think that you'll feel like everything's fine, but you will live shallow.
I think that was what I was saying about my marriage.
Yeah.
Was as much as I think it was amazing, we had a fun marriage. Fun.
We've talked about that. Like, yeah, gosh, we did all the things, concerts, trips. It seemed great. Yeah.
Yeah. But depth, you know, really what was going on emotionally, we didn't talk. We wouldn't have had a conversation about how I'm feeling, and or if something had bothered me to actually sit down and talk about it. I would say we avoided conflict and just survived.
Right.
Autopilot.
Which could have been also, I mean, from maybe not your parents, but who knows how he was raised. But that was for sure my family's motto, right? Like, sweep it under the rug. And God bless my dad, because he dealt with a lot, like I mentioned, abusive father and basically on his own. Now as a parent, you know, it's like you can take from that, but also like we still need to process like what's happening in life. And I think that for so long it was like, it could be worse. So we just like put on the good face. And you know, that gets you so far until you come to a certain place in life where you're like, okay, I need to take a moment and like, there's a lot I just haven't looked at. Yeah. And like, that's not helping me anymore because now I'm just avoiding.
I avoided. I think that's why I love, and I know you are the same with your kids now. It's like, we talk about feelings, like what's going on? Why are you sad? Why are you happy? So that they feel like there's an open space. But I do think that your parents, my parents, that generation.
It was a different generation.
The reason why I forgive so well, like understanding what happened to them in their childhood to have done what they did.
Yeah.
Why did they look the other way? Well, if they had the abuse, they didn't get acknowledged, then they were told to not talk about it again. Then they go and have children. And that was their learned behavior. Our environments shape us. If you don't have faith or any other thing to keep you grounded, you're just navigating whatever environment. In our 40s going, how did this all turn out? It's like, well, it started when you were 5.
Right.
And you're like, okay, well, I had no control when I was 5.
But it's so important. What legacy are you leaving with your kids? And like, we do have a little bit of that control.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, this stops with me here. And I think it's a balance too. We're still moving forward. We're not going to dwell in, I don't know, staying a victim in our emotions. It's like, we have to feel these. We have to go through it with our kids. Like, yes, like we need to feel this stuff. This is normal. Like all these feelings God gave us. But like, now how do we move forward? And it really doesn't matter. That's the best legacy you can leave, when you can feel like, okay, this stuff might have happened to me, but like I can authentically stand here and know that like, my heart has been in love towards all these people. Like, what more do you need?
How do you forgive when the person that kind of contributed to the failure of the marriage is in that person's life? And I'm asking you because you do an incredible job. So how would you help somebody navigating truly forgiving?
Gosh, I feel like, forgiveness, I think, is like a layer thing too. I'm sure it would be a big challenge if every time you saw the person who broke up your marriage, they were being spiteful to you, or, because I know that some people experience that where they're like, okay, I've done nothing and you're with my, ex-husband, so you should be kind. So I would just say I feel very blessed that over the years, my experience has been that on the other side, the person has met me with like a very authentic humanity of like what happened. And I would say, which will make me tear up because I think it's been the Lord's sweetness. And again, like in terms of being able to heal, for me personally, I just appreciate so much authenticity. And I feel like if you can meet someone with authenticity and genuine emotion and like hear an apology even, like there's so much beauty in that because we all mess up. And I think that makes it very different to walk through than being met with aggression. And so I would say that I feel grateful for that. And I'm grateful to know that in my situation, my son is in a family where I feel like he's being shown that. And so I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think that, I don't know, it's a hard thing to speak on, right? You don't want to sound rude, but the divorce was hard for me at the beginning because I felt like I had been so wronged. And before any communication was there, that these people were just off living their best life. But with that person, forgiveness, I think, is really remembering that releasing someone, releasing anyone, for me, it was like, okay, God, whatever this is for them, whatever this is for me, like you have to lead this. And I have to just keep remembering the grace I've been given and not knowing really the truth, because we can see whatever we can see and put our own opinions on stuff, but I can't live feeling chained to this. And I'm going to trust for what is to come. And that was like my walk for a while, is like future hope. Like,
yeah.
I don't feel it. Is it ever coming? Tosh, like this is what you would have told anyone when you were married, like that going through cancer, going through anything, like have hope, future hope. Answer your question. But forgiveness, I just think it's for me, it was a laying down, and it still can be. Sometimes I'll get rubbed the wrong way. And I think that's again coming back to like everything in life of like, okay, I'm here. Okay, no, let's be humbled again. So much of our pain in life with whatever comes from our own expectations. And then like that person doesn't meet us in the way that we would want. And so in forgiveness too, it's like, that person is not you. And so these expectations, like they're not always going to come, but just, it's like that beautiful freedom of release and of letting go and of realizing that as like souls here, like my hope and prayer has always been that the Lord's love for my ex-husband, for all these people, that in some way God would be glorified. Like that, I would pray that all the time. God, use it for your glory, like everything else. What am I going to see? And like trying to be expectant for like what I was going to see in their life.
Yeah.
And that would give me excitement to be like, okay, this is going to be a really cool kingdom story later. And maybe that's just going to be how our kids have seen us navigate this, and how like my relationship with God has grown. And I think it has on the other side. And hopefully that can help someone else walking through it, because there's emotion on the other side too that I can't speak into. Like that's different than my pain.
For someone just walking through that spiritual journey, when did you feel like you discovered it?
Honestly, at a strange young age, when we moved to Texas, I remember having like a moment in my closet where I know it sounds weird, but like I felt the Holy Spirit. It's like I knew at a young age that like Jesus was there. And I had like a few, I'll call it an angel encounter, where I got like lost, and it was a janitor that like stopped me. It was at my granny's apartment complex and was like, we need to wait here. Somehow my granny and my mom found me, like the elevator doors open. I don't know where I had gone off to. I got on an elevator and just pressed a button and left. So when you're, really young, that feels strange, right? The door's open. You don't know where your family's gone. You're like now in a weird building. But I remember this janitor was like, we need to wait here. And anyways, when they came up, they were like, why did you just stand? Like, why are you just waiting here? Like kind of asking like, what happened? And I was like, well, the janitor told me to wait, like you'd be here. And they're like, no one is with you, to where just these moments when you're young and you're like, okay, like, no, someone was with me. Like this man was standing with me the whole time telling me to wait, that everything would be okay. And he was with me when the doors open and you're standing there and they're like, there's no one with you. So I just feel like the Lord, like, angels around you are protection. And I just feel like I've seen his hand from a young age. But then like, I think because my parents, we would go to church, but because I didn't feel like it was pushed on me, which I had friends that it for sure was. And they had their rebellion stories, where it was all about you do this, you do that. That I felt growing up, especially we moved back to Canada, and I don't think any of my friends had faith, all different religions. So faith for me had to be real at a young age, right? I ended up going to a Christian private school. It was my 8th grade Bible class, maybe because I again, love reading, super nerdy, but just the richness of the word. I think too, just in terms of deep thought, I really had to be okay, do I actually believe this? And I wanted to know if I did. And so for anyone questioning if it's Christianity, I would say spend time in God's word. It is alive.
We're meant for community and connection.
Oh, 100%. Going back to church, too, if that's not anything that people can make, that wasn't the old church. They weren't going into, there was a synagogue in the Jewish time, but the church is the body of Christ. It is finding like-minded people around you that can speak truth into you. Yeah. And in these moments be hey, you're isolating. We all need a lens that we need to, and I would encourage that for people out there. What is true, right? Mm-hmm. About yourself, about the world, about what you want for your life. If we go down those paths of, self-deprecation and isolation and things that we think, oh, this is going to help me at this time. And that can turn into all kinds of stuff. Addiction, right? I'm going to numb with this. I'm going to avoid with that. We've all done it in some form.
I think when you isolate, you just sit in it longer. A lot of times it's numbing, right? Yeah. Whether it's a bottle of wine or whatever, it's just because they don't want to go and have to face all of that. But I think that that's what helps you get out of that is community. I'm a super positive person, but think about our minds as negative, right? So you're sitting home, isolating, and you don't have somebody saying, hey, you got this. Right. You're doing a great job.
A good quote, because it fits into this, but Henry Allen, who's an author, he says, our glory is hidden in our pain if we allow God to bring the gift of himself in our experience of it. And so that plus this other one that he says, our efforts to disconnect ourselves from our own suffering end up disconnecting our suffering from God's suffering for us. The way out of our loss and hurt is in and through. And I think one, just God's glory is in our pain, so we can't disconnect. We have to move through it. And then him just saying, if we try and disassociate from our suffering, we're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. We're going to only see him working when we step into it and through it, and then with that beauty of community. So, don't shy away from that. Allow yourself to be seen. And that was my promise to myself moving forward in my next relationship, with anyone. It was this is who I am. I want to be seen. I wanted to see my partner. And don't we all want to be seen? Here I am, goofy, strange, weird, neurotic, whatever it is. This is who I am. You're still there. That's amazing. I'm still here for you. Let me journey this with you. And so I promised myself, I'm not going to show anything but myself. And if someone doesn't like it, okay, we're not meant for each other, And I think so often we avoid because we don't want to be rejected, but it's isn't that what you love about your best of friends? They're strange, quirky.
Well, I will actually say that that's where I am now, where I love all my other parts that I didn't show for years. I missed a pretty silly, crazy, adventurous girl that she suppressed her emotions because of the relationship I was in. For a period of time, I was by myself and just trying to survive after the divorce and finding who I was. But I would say, and this being married now, it's as you're discovering yourself, because I was in another relationship, I was not afraid to be who I was, at all.
And I don't know if that is having the loss and you just say, okay, screw it because that didn't work. Or if it is, and that's where, I haven't been able to really have a conversation with my ex-husband. I don't know if just our two personalities were so much trying to be a certain way for each other, or if we were young, and just trying to find ourselves apart from each other. But I don't feel like I was soft either. I felt like both of us were really trying to achieve. And that was a lot of how I was brought up. CEO dad, again, perform, do well. I just feel like I felt like I had to be a certain way. And I couldn't really just be either. I think becoming a mom, we had owned a business and then we sold it and then I was just at home. So then I started getting back into fitness and teaching that. And it was anything that I could find some type of external validation from when I really think about it, that gave me joy and excitement, and just trying to figure out what I was doing with my time. If I'm not working full time, then how am I providing value? And that's hard when you have a young child because they're not giving you feedback like, great job, mom.
Yeah.
You're just like, are you alive?
Helping somebody going through, because I think we're at this age, we have a lot of friends that are all kind of, and unfortunately at the divorce age of our lives. And obviously you're remarried, a lot of friends are talking about dating and their experiences. I think we're all beautifully broken, and it's just navigating that, because we're not going to wake up and not have triggers. We're not going to wake up and have our childhood that shaped who we are today go away. It's all there.
Yeah.
I think you have a beautiful story with Brad. You coming from something so broken and then having a Brad who was everything you wanted, but because you hadn't been where you really needed to be, he didn't feel like he could be that one, even though you had the most beautiful story.
I tear up thinking about him. I felt like with Brad, he came into my life like it was too soon. I would take my son to baseball games because I didn't want to be in the house. The house was very sad to me.
Me too.
And I didn't want my son to see his mom sad. I thought, honestly, I'm going to go in the mission field. And I was still, I was praying that my marriage was going to come back together. And the more I would pray or be like, God, this cannot be how this story is ending. And I would cling to the stories of the couple that was divorced for 2 years and then they got remarried, and then through an email or something, I would hear that we're getting a house, moving forward. My son said yeah, dad and, they got married. I was like, what? Okay. So it was in these moments where, again, I had to be okay with release. I didn't want it, but it came faster to me. And, you have a lot of voices talking into you, which I would say as advice, know who aligns with you, know who is maybe a wise spiritual leader who you trust when you're going through heartbreak or anything, because people are going to tell you a lot of things, right? You have the friends, maybe they don't align with you. So they're saying, no, just F this, go do it. When you're trying to navigate dating, I met my first husband in college. He was my second, maybe third long-term real boyfriend. Fell in love. We dated all through college, maybe 2 years after, 3, and got married. This is the person I've known since 17 years old.
Yeah.
And now I'm trying to date again almost in my 30s. It's such a different world. Brad and I met after we talked for a long time. I didn't think he was going to be anything. We talked back about our history and I'd be like, don't get attached to me. You're so sweet. I'm still going through this. I don't know who I am. I think I'm going to be not a nun, but basically I'm probably going to I just want to go serve in Uganda. I don't know what I wanted to do, but I actually was not looking for a relationship. And I would go on some dates, and that was weird. People just date around. I can't do that. I can't date around. I would go on a date with one person and I'd be like, I'm so sorry, I'm seeing someone else. They're we're not official. And I'm okay, just so I would never want to hurt anyone. I'm this is not going to be good for me. But so Brad and I's friendship and talking, there was something about him and I can't even explain it. I felt like I had known him and we would joke about it for 500 years, that, which didn't even make sense to me. But he was this old soul and I fell in love with him. Just you genuinely wanting the best for someone. And that is how I felt about Brad. This person's heart makes me so happy. He just genuinely feels good. And I felt like he wasn't what I thought in my brain at the time. I'm well, I'll find someone who's, XXX, whatever, this little checklist, and maybe a pastor, are going into the ministry, I don't know what I thought. But what I felt with him was that years down the road after 4 years of healing and me doing whatever I was going to do to succeed on my own, that we would get married. So I really tried to push it off, and in God's timing and how our story worked out, we ended up getting married. And I look back into his relationship with my son, and now we have a son of our own. I just saw some sweetness of how Brad was and how he spoke about me. So many little things I could share about our story. But I would pray, God, just take Brad and get it out. And every time I would feel more connected to him. And I just felt this was exactly what God had for me. And I also realized about myself that things, I think, when you're dating, you're wanting maybe this external checklist of what you want the person to look like or be or succeed or money, or we have all these very worldly things if we're honest to ourselves.
Yeah, we do.
And sometimes it's because what is that going to reflect on me if I don't have that? And that was an ugly thing for me to see, in my heart of what is my checklist about? What I realized was the most valuable was I'm 100% authentic with this man. This relationship has been very sweet for me about how like true love should feel and how being seen, and like what I would pray for when I was going through it was, again, okay, God, you love me unconditionally. I chose to love my ex-husband unconditionally. Will I ever have that for me? Like, that's how I felt. And that would make me tear up, because it was going back to that. Like, I guess I'm just not valuable enough for someone to love me regardless. Like, all the years of marriage and our kid, everything we had been through, like that wasn't enough for my last husband. And I don't feel like I did anything bad to him. So when am I enough? And I had to step back and be like, that's someone's choice, because I'm choosing that. You chose that for me. And I feel like he gave me that gift in Brad. And that was sweet.
Yeah. Well, that's why I say it's a beautiful story.
Yeah.
I think about dating, because I'm in the dating world,
Well, and I feel like I'm a 90-year-old when you guys talk about your dating stories now, because I'm like, are they just a loving, good person? Like
they are not like my Brad. That's what you're telling us.
I think it's, again, sorry for everyone listening, I'm such an old woman, but like these dating apps, this instant gratification, this like fake facade, like all these things that were like, oh, dude, are they like this attractive enough for me, or this, or are they making enough money? Like, does that matter if they're like an asshole?
Yeah.
I mean, does it matter if you don't connect with them? I mean, what are you looking for? Do you actually want a genuine connection?
It's hard to meet people, real people. That's what I would say, that really feel comfortable saying who they are. Most people are trying to be somebody they're not, right? And like, it's really uncomfortable to be with somebody that you want, but you can't feel it because you're broken. It's so uncomfortable to lean into a healthy person because it's not the love we felt. So it feels really awkward, and it doesn't feel like the right love.
You're the one that feels deep and safe. When you're used to feeling, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like the more centralized or passionate. And I think sadly, a lot of us get more attached to that, which is, I think, stepping back to like wanting, oh, this person doesn't want me, so let me earn that. It's like that wounded child in you that's seeking validation.
I've seen you go through the Brad thing. So there was moments where the breakup, he's not my person.
Yeah.
And how did you get to a spot that maybe it was you and not Brad?
Right. And I think I always knew that. So I think that was at least one step in the healthy way.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a few things where if we were talking about like our faith journey together, he had come from a Catholic background and I hadn't. And that to me was scary, because in my first marriage, at the end, my ex-husband said something about, well, faith was here for you and here for me. Where if you're not kind of speaking the same language, or you start wanting to make decisions based on maybe something in your faith and they don't align, like those are things that you don't think about when you're maybe dating, right? When we first started dating, I didn't feel like we lined up completely there. So I had a little bit of an apprehension, but I pulled away, one, based on time. I just needed to be by myself for like 3 years. And I just had that in my head. Or people telling me, you've only dated like 4 or 5. Like, and I mean, again, I didn't date well. Like I was still mourning and grieving and just trying not to rush anything. So I'd say, you know what, we just need to like have a break, or I'm not able to give you, what you want. And that's not fair. Like having been so hurt the way I was in my marriage, to have a man tell me, and not in a way, because I would say that, right? Like, okay, thank you for all the lines, like stop with them. But, like, I've been looking for you, not someone like you, like literally, like it's you. I just fell in love with this person's heart. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I also prayed for if I got married again, my next set of like in-laws. And when I met Brad's mom, just in her communication, such a faith-filled woman. And he would speak so highly about his mom's love for the Lord and her faith and her service for others. And Brad was my like cheerleader at the Sterling Project. Like he was helping us set up for those events, even if you didn't see it. He was coming and he'd have scripture verses or like a pin, or like he wanted me to go fulfill my dreams and change the world. And the thing that he thought was the most attractive about me, which I guess for some time I only felt like I was seen for my external, or like I didn't know what my value was even anymore. He would speak so much into what a strong like woman I was and how my love for the Lord. And when I met his mom, she talked about how she had been praying for the woman in her son's life, for years. And there was just something that, like, I don't know what it was, but I just felt like that's what I've wanted, because God knows what is going to happen to me. You want to love that person's heart, and I want to be loved for my heart. And I want a family that is encouraging, loving others and helping others. And that family was just so beautiful in that way. So that was other reasons why I was just like, why am I like so afraid of this? Like, why do I keep trying to get back to like all the options? Why do I keep thinking I need to try out every single thing out there to know that this is right when I already feel it's right?
Yeah, there was a girl, I follow her on social media, and she says, I stopped looking for a fire.
Yeah.
And I looked for a
fireplace. I think I've heard that.
Oh my gosh, that is the most beautiful. I think now that I'm older, it's the heart. Like, what's going to happen when I'm sick? Is this person going to be laying next to me in the bed? These are lessons learned of going into another relationship, is we're always on the same team.
Right.
Not playing different sides to destroy us. So we just have to remind ourselves that we're on the same team together. So I'm going to end with all these lessons you've learned through little girl to now amazing, beautiful wife. What would you say to someone that hasn't had all of your life experiences? What wisdom would you give them if you could go back to like the younger Natasha?
I would say what others do to you does not define who you are. So do not let any like cruel word, someone's maybe lack of respect. People's actions are a reflection of themselves, right? And I would just say, stand in love, stand in, again, the truth of who you are, which is a valuable human being. And I would say, do your best to always try to understand. But also say, again, to like choose authentic relationships from an early age. I think from an early age, we want to fit in, or we want to find, I don't know what it is now, but like the cool group, this group, that group. And we're all trying to figure out our identity through other people getting the same identity. Like that, when I think back, I always have to laugh, right? Like in high school, when it's like, oh, we're not going to be the popular kids or the jocks or this, so we're going to all be goth or emo. And it's like, we're all trying to be the same of something. We all want to feel like we fit in somewhere.
We all want to fit in.
Yeah. And when you are uniquely you, like you will fit in amongst whoever you are, because you're yourself, to live loved, to love, to be loved, and to be known.
I think if any relationship veers you off when you're younger into somebody that you're not, it's the moment you should go the other way.
100%.
Yeah. I wanted to thank you.
Thank you for having me.